Here.
Ms. Higa?
Here.
For the Director of Finance, Ms. Miller. Chairperson Hendricks, you have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right. First order of business is approval of the committee agenda. Okay, it's been
Second.
moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great, thanks. And item 2 is approval of our minutes from May 9th. Recognizing some of you were not here. Take a
So
look.
moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So
And I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Joy and Lynn are abstaining. You got that today? Great. Thank you. Okay. So item 3 is the review of our CEO, CIO personal performance targets criteria. That's a lot to say in the morning without coffee. So, Melissa, can you take us through that?
Director of Human Resources. Each year, the board reviews prospective performance for the CEO and the CIO. And if you recall, in May, the board did review it for the CEO and CIO for the 2019-20 performance plan year. And at that time, there were some updates that were requested by the board. And they are listed, track changes in the attachments 1 and 2 for the CEO and the CIO. For both of those positions, the board requested for the staff development criteria that in addition to overseeing a stable and competent workforce, that they also ensure it's succession ready. And so you'll note there that we did add that language for both of the positions under staff development. In addition, for the CIO, there were, yes.
For Gail, we're on Comp 10, and this is just, I guess I want to flag it because we're going to be doing the CEO and CIO evaluations in our offsite in October. And so this is the criterion that we're using to kind of do the evaluation on the CEO and CIO, and we just made some tweaks to the language of the criteria. So Melissa was talking on Comp 10, I believe, the CEO criteria.
Yes.
That's where we're kind of made some modifications.
And for the CIO, there were discussions in regards to the role he will play in oversight for the collaborative model, which is one of 3 top priorities at CalSTRS, and communicating the board's expectation to him about that role. And so we looked at that management criteria and determined that it was covered nicely in the descriptors that are presently there. So no changes were made to it, except to add the in front of strategic plan, but that was more of a grammatical addition. For the CEO, the board requested under management that clarifying language be added to clarify the board's expectation of the CEO in managing executive staff performance and achieving those business objectives. And so you'll note that under the CEO. Not all of the board members were present during the May meeting, and so this is coming back really to have you put eyes on it again. Hopefully it meets the board's expectation as it's been added to the criteria. And with that, if there's any questions or feedback about it, I can take that.
Any questions, feedback? We kind of went over it too when we talked about it in May.
Yeah.
Gail?
I'm just curious, it also doesn't mention any kind of management around risk for the CIO criteria. But is that just part of is that in the strategic plan? And I'm not as familiar with it as I should be. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yeah, it's an action item, so we do need to approve it.
So I move approval of the item.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right,
right.
our updated criterion has been approved.
Perfect.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
All right, and then item 4 is administrative procedure changes pursuant to the CEO delegation.
Okay, Melissa Narsha, Director of Human Resources. This item is a report out on updates made to the compensation administrative procedures per the CEO delegation. Most of you will recall in November of 2018, we reviewed the CEO delegation for compensation components. And at that time, additional compensation components were added to the CEO's authority. At that time, the board also requested that they receive an update after the CEO has reviewed and adopted changes for awareness. So this is an information consent item, and it is introducing to you the changes that were made per that delegation. I can share with you a little bit of the process so you understand what staff and the CEO did. We did meet with Jack to go over the preliminary proposed update. So that was staff, that was myself, investments, Scott and Chris, which included red line appendices with the description and justification of each change. In addition to the preliminary review, there was a formal proposal that Jack received, and that was accompanied by the investment consultant Makita's opinion letter. So again, just for your awareness, this review is being done with the same care and due diligence and scrutiny that the compensation would place on items that were presented to the committee. After the CEO approved the updates, the impacted staff in the incentive plan were notified timely and prior to the July 1st performance plan year. So I thought the review process went well. Jack is here, he can speak to it. But that's really all I have as far as reporting out. If you'd like, I can go over the actual changes. It's up to you.
What's the pleasure of the committee? Would that be helpful, or? We've read the materials,
Okay.
so I would say we're good.
All right.
Yep. Any other questions? It's an information item. Great, okay, thanks, Melissa. And I have to admit, I was remiss. We have a new process about public comment, and I didn't start off the meeting announcing what I should, so I'm going to go back and just mention that there will be public comment period at the end of each agenda item. The time allotment and other terms are subject to change and are at the discretion of the committee chair. So I guess I'd like to ask, were there any public comments for items 1, 2, 3, or 4? So this is a new process, so we'll get in the rhythm of making sure that we are fastidious about following it. My apologies for not catching that earlier. Great, all right, thanks, Melissa. All right, so we'll move on to item number 5, which is the assessment of the compensation program in alignment with the collaborative model. And I'll tee this up. We've got Luis Navas here from GGA, and this is the beginning of I think a year-long or maybe beyond a year-long conversation that we're going to be having in terms of looking at our compensation strategies as it pertains to the collaborative model. So to me, the conversation we have today is critical because it's going to give us a kind of high-level overview. Hopefully you've been able to see Luis's slides. He's going to take us through that. But it's a chance for us to ask some high-level questions about the compensation strategy for us as we enter into the conversation we're having on the investment committee side on the collaborative model. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today, Luis, and welcome to CalSTRS.
Thank you, thank you. So Luis Navas, GGA. We've tried to prepare this presentation today, knowing that some of the directors are new, did not take, were not part of some of the prior conversations, especially some of the more recent ones, which were pretty meaty and insightful and helpful. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to try to do my best to try to bring back some of the previous conversations that we've had, so we can kind of help the committee tie everything in together. So again, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, there's been a lot of work being done across the organization for the last couple of years in moving towards the collaborative investing model. One of the kind of key linkages around that is looking at reducing total compensation spend across the organization. And it's kind of an education process in how you do that, in the sense of moving less compensation spend away from the external fund management side and bringing more in-house at a lower cost base, and trying to do that in a risk mitigated fashion, so that at the end of the day, there's more monies to benefit all the key stakeholders, both government stakeholders and pensioners. This is not the way it's been designed is very customized to CalSTRS, considering its unique governance structure, but in kind of the basic principles of this movement have been around for years and tested. And so I believe that the board has really gone through a lot of diligence for the last 2 years in really making sure that this more proprietary model is designed well for CalSTRS needs. So what we talked about at the last meeting, and that really kickstarts kind of the today and the next kind of 10 months or so, is once you've actually looked at kind of shifting as you're doing it around your total organizational strategy, it's critical to then say, okay, how do we need to make changes, if any, in our compensation strategy to make sure that all of our human capital is aligned completely to that new strategy, especially when a big shift in that strategy is around investing. And making sure that we've got kind of the proper risk profile around compensation and performance drivers for people around those dollars. So an organization, some of you, actually now I look around, probably Dana's the only person that would probably remember, is one of the first things that we did when we first got engaged about 7 years ago was go through an exercise of reviewing the compensation strategy. One of the key shifts at that point was starting to move towards internalizing more assets in-house, and just making sure that, especially after kind of what the organization had experienced in 2009, making sure that the compensation strategy truly reflected the shift in strategy and it kind of protected the board around all compensation issues. So with that kind of background context, what I'll just say is what we're going to try to cover today is the importance of aligning the CalSTRS compensation to the new collaborative model, any potential changes or enhancements that may be needed to the CalSTRS compensation programs based on a shift in the compensation strategy, and then kind of the next steps. And the next steps will be, I think, a healthy discussion, because there is a lot on the table for the next 10 months. What we're trying to do is we're trying to map this to help the business units in terms of their need to implement the strategy in a timely fashion. And as you can imagine, a key part of this is making sure that CalSTRS has the right talent to implement the strategy. And in getting that talent, you've got to have the right compensation programs to get access to that talent. So we're trying to kind of not be the working alongside Melissa and her team, we're trying to make sure that the team at CalSTRS and the board have the right tools, come next spring or so, to kind of carry out the human capital component of the strategy, of the collaborative model strategy. So with that, sorry, I was going off of mine. The importance of aligning the compensation strategy. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and just talk about just comp strategy in general. So the comp strategy of any organization is probably one of the shortest documents that you might actually have as a committee. But in my view, it's actually the most important kind of piece of literature that you have as a committee. It really governs kind of how you handle as a committee, as a board, all issues around compensation. And it's a document that you as a committee can not only use it in terms of communicating to staff and saying, look, this is how we're going to handle our compensation decisions, but just as importantly, it allows people like, Sharon or Harry or any of you, as you're communicating with your key stakeholder groups, to say, look, this is why we take the approach that we do to compensation. And so there's complete clarification, there's complete transparency, and it really is kind of leading best practice around compensation governance. So there's no confusion as to why CalSTRS takes the approach it does to compensation, which I think kind of, historically, kind of pre-2009, there wasn't as great as clarity of that. So as we move in this direction, we really want to make sure that there is an exceptional level of clarity around what the compensation strategy is at CalSTRS and why we're doing what we're doing. So as I mentioned, the comp strategy governs all of that in terms of the approach, and then you take that comp strategy, which outlines how the committee and the board feels about risk around compensation, how it feels about targeting compensation, how it says, this is at the end of the day what we want to reward. This is how much we want to reward. These are the types of measures, the weightings. Once you have that all laid out, it then gives us working with management the ability to go out and design the plans that you need to reflect that comp strategy. And I am gonna, like I mentioned earlier, kind of go in different directions today because there are some new directors in that. But GGA works for the board. We are independent in that for we can't do our job just like the auditors can't, et cetera, and they're independent without collaborating with management at the end of the day. But we report to you. And so, we work with you to develop that compensation strategy. We then take that compensation strategy and collaborate with Melissa and her team to then design the comp plans that reflect that. And then it is governed by you and administered by the HR team. So simple slide, simple document, but it's the most, in my view, it's the most important element for any board. And it'll be critical for you kind of going forward as the organization moves towards the collaborative model. So this is not the detailed document, just wanted to give you a little kind of sneak peek of what your current compensation strategy is. But as I mentioned, the last time it was reviewed was 2011, 2012. It is not typical practice. We talked about this in May to wait this long to review your compensation strategy. Many of you know that there were reasons for that as to why it was deferred. But regardless, now is definitely the right time to look at it again and make sure that it is completely aligned with the revisions to the CalSTRS strategy, organizational strategy.
Question about that?
Yeah.
Because in reading the materials, I was wondering, in general, and Melissa, you might have insight into this, how often in general do funds have a cycle of when they refresh comp strategies? Because I was thinking, well, we're refreshing it because we're looking at this collaborative model. But in general, is it general practice as we refresh a lot of other policies on a 3, 4, 5-year cycle to refresh a comp strategy, or what's the best practice?
In your comp policy, it does talk about certain components and reviewing it definitely for your labor market. You review that every 2 years. And I believe there's a statement in there that talks about annually assessing not necessarily the entire compensation strategy, but elements of it. So I think there's definitely areas within your comp policy that support the review. I think Luis would probably have a little bit more experience with other funds doing it because he supports others through that process.
Yeah, so I would say, as Melissa mentioned, you have the ability under the current plan design to kind of annually do a cursory look at it. In terms of what we're doing this year and what I call a deep dive, that's usually every 3 to 4 years. And the rationale for that is, that's usually consistent with kind of a typical timeline for a strategy timeline, strategy review. It's more of a normal timeline for changes to occur in an organization. It usually a deep dive would typically be every 3 to 4 years. It's not to say, I want to make it clear that the fact that it hasn't been done in this kind of detail in 7 years, that we've done something wrong. Like, keep in mind, you actually have touched on certain elements within the compensation strategy in the last 7 years. You did a deep dive around the peer group. You did a deep dive around some of the performance benchmarks. You did a deep dive around some of the risk provisions. The part that you haven't done, which I find very valuable, and you're going to find, I think, very valuable to do every 3, 4 years, is more of that one-on-one and group discussion as a team to say, look, like the philosophical approach, the principles approach, to make sure that you're all on the same page. Because at the end of the day, you're the ones that need to be going out there and communicating the approach to compensation. It's a sensitive issue. And make sure that you feel well equipped and agree with what the comp strategy is. So So with that, I've touched on kind of the elements of the comp strategy, and then just some of the principles. And as you'll see in the next following slides, you will all again be part of this in terms of framing what the key principles should be. So I've said this to the committee for years now, and I'm a huge believer in this. Compensation has to be competitive. It's important, but it's not everything. Like, there are so many other reasons why people go to work for certain organizations, and more importantly, stay with certain organizations. And so, we're going to make sure that we tie that into the compensation strategy, just like we did, and it exists today. Harry's not here today, but we all know that Harry. One of the key things, and I fully agree with him, is making sure that we have a positive working culture. That definitely helps and goes a long way. So it's that healthy balance of all the different elements, but some of the key principles that are there today that, in the case of these three, I probably would think this group is not going to want to shift too much away from these, but maybe, craft it slightly different is internal, equity, being externally competitive, and incentive based. So, we've kind of somewhat joked in the past about on the incentive base, but we're quite serious, as I think, as a group, is we want people to be paid competitively on a performance base. If they deliver for the pensioners and for the key stakeholders, then we're willing to kind of share a reward for that. But we need to see kind of performance. This is just a quick outline of the current peer group that is used in the compensation strategy. We'll get more into this in the coming weeks. The peer group is definitely a very important element to the compensation strategy. I've said to you before that data is dangerous. You can kind of, depending on what kind of a peer group you use and this and that, you can craft it to get to an end decision in very different ways. So you want to, not treat it purely as a science and complement that with a bit of an art too. But we want it to make sure that it gives you the right peer group to attract the right kind of people, to make sure that you don't lose the kind of people that you want to keep. But also to make sure it's a kind of peer group that when you're out there communicating with different stakeholder groups, that people don't scratch their head and say, why are you comparing yourself to Goldman Sachs, which we don't, but making sure it's justifiable, right? And gives staff at the end of the day the tools to make sure that they can attract and retain effectively. So we'll be, that'll be one element of many that we will go through in the coming weeks with you and make sure that you are in agreement with. Market positioning will be another one, making sure that, based on the risk profile, more importantly, based on the level of performance that you expect from the team, that will be indicative as to how you will feel like you want to position, compensation. And, we've always, I think for the most part, said here that we want to be competitive. We do not want to pay, top decile and reward the wrong kind of behavior, but we want to be competitive for the right level of performance. This is just some of the quantitative elements. These are important as you think, kind of going forward, especially with a collaborative model, some of the tools in your toolbox that you have as a committee in terms of making sure that you can attract the right kind of people. But again, there are a number of qualitative aspects that I always encourage the committee to be thinking about as to why you'd want to work and stay at CalSTRS. So we kind of already went into this a little bit. We definitely spent a lot of time on this in the May meeting, but again, for the benefit of some of the new directors, I thought it would be healthy to go through it. We really want to make sure that we align the compensation strategy to the collaborative model. In my view, as we talked about, and there was an agreement by the committee, the compensation strategy as is today is not aligned to the collaborative model, which makes perfect sense because you weren't going down that path previously. And so these are some of the things that we want to make sure that the strategy going forward deals with as it pertains to the collaborative model. We want to make sure that staff is properly incented and motivated with the intended results of the collaborative model, and we'll get to that in a moment around some of the measures. We definitely want to make sure that, especially for the positions that This committee has accountability for, but also for positions that staff is going to need to recruit to make the collaborative model work, that you have the right tools in that toolbox to do so, that you've got the right roles in the organization to be successful. The collaborative model, as you've heard many times before, is going to require a different set of skills, and we want to make sure that we get that right. And then, you know, Harry, and I think Sharon, you brought this up at the May meeting, and we had mentioned that we'd be coming back and talking more about this, is, you know, I think the committee and the board has done a phenomenal job over the last several years. It's, you know, it's been a learning curve in some respects of making sure that we have a process in place to make sure that at the end of the day, when a dollar amount is being communicated in terms of what you're paying your senior team, that, you know, people do not scratch their heads and say, why did they do that, right? So we've actually had a great, you know, kind of progression and run where, you know, people in the community, in your stakeholder group have kind of said, look, you know, it is a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's justified and we understand why it's being done. Well, the performance management processes that you have in place today have helped you do that. And we just need to make sure that those are tweaked with the changes around the collaborative model.
Lisa, I also want to just to make committee members aware that we've got Steve McCourt in the room too, and we've asked him from Akita, our investment consultant, just for him to kind of jump in and opine at different times. So if committee members have questions just from the investment side, since we're in comp now talking about this because it's a comp issue, but obviously it influences the investment committee and decisions made
Correct.
there.
And as the committee knows, as Steve knows, you know, there's a couple of slides in here where, you know, we're going to be need to be working in collaboration with the investment committee and their advisors, as we have in the past, around some of, to this last point, you know, make sure that the measures are modified to reflect what's required under the collaborative model. So some of the current gaps. So again, this is not to be, to come across as a criticism. It's you know, it's to be expected that you haven't been, you know, going down the path of a collaborative model. So there's going to be some gaps in the current strategy and plans that would need to be updated to make sure that you're aligned to the collaborative model. So, you know, we talked about, and what we did was, obviously we've worked with a number of organizations across the globe that do not have what CalSTRS has termed the collaborative model, but have moved in their own unique direction with the same kind of principle at heart, which is to try to find an additional way to add value to stakeholders by reducing external fund management costs and bringing more talent in-house in the best way possible to do that. And so what we did was we kind of wanted to look at kind of best practices in that, and then come back to the committee with you know, a short list of some of the things that we see would need to be done. So we talked about one, which is the, you know, need for an updated compensation strategy. As part of that, obviously, we're going to need to make some modifications to the incentive program to make sure that you've got the new and improved performance measures, you know, potentially some modifications in terms of how you have applied some of those measures. We'll get into that more in a little bit. We touched already on number 2. You know, you've got a really solid, I think, performance management system. It's just making sure that it's tweaked and modified to reflect some of the new measures, potentially some new weightings, that sort of thing in terms of alignment to the collaborative model. And again, as I mentioned, the measures. So in terms of point 1, so we already talked about that it's been several years since we went through this more kind of deep dive. We have over the years touched on some of the elements of the compensation strategy, such as the peer group, but now we're recommending that deep dive. So, you know, we're going to walk through with you and as a group talk about what are the right measures kind of going forward, both quantitative and qualitative. Do we need to make any tweaks and changes to it? Do we need to make some adjustments in terms of where the emphasis is being placed on performance? One of the things within that framework that definitely has come up, which makes total sense, is to say, we really don't have a way right now in the current compensation strategy, in the current compensation plans, to make sure that we're measuring success under the collaborative model. And so we want to make sure that that's in place so that this committee can evaluate how the collaborative model is going, potentially reward for it, and then just as importantly, if not more importantly, make sure that you now have a mechanism to communicate back to your stakeholders to say, look, this is working because we have a way of measuring it. In terms of, so again, some education for some of the new directors. So currently there are, for the most part, two elements of compensation for the investment staff at CalSTRS. You've got kind of a market competitive base salary and a market competitive annual bonus plan. Even though it is quote unquote an annual bonus plan, which like all annual bonus plans is paid out over a 12-month period, what we instituted several years ago was to make sure that you're not rewarding just for a one-year performance timeline. CalSTRS is not here is thinking about kind of the next 2-3 years. CalSTRS is thinking about many years down the road and making sure that the pension promise can be made. And so we want staff to be thinking long term, and that has worked. That has worked well. But we've had our discussions around the need to start including some form of long-term incentive component to reward actually and get people thinking about beyond 3 years. And that's going to be critical as you look at the collaborative model, because in those types of investment classes, you are thinking longer term, and so we want people to not only be incentivized to be thinking long term, but we also want them to be penalized for not meeting what the board wants to be achieved in the long term. We'll talk about in the ongoing discussions around the compensation strategies is, what component of pay or how much of pay does the committee want to be in terms of fixed pay versus variable pay? You've heard our views in the past that we're definitely bigger supporters of having more pay at risk than getting paid more as a total percentage of the pie for just showing up to work, right? We want to make sure that there's a
Based on performance.
Exactly, pay for performance. That there's a great message there that you can go back to your stakeholders with. We actually talked about some of these already, to be honest, so I'm going to skip through this, but we'll be going through the peer group, we'll be going through the market positioning, all as part of the compensation strategy review, but all for truly thinking about it from a perspective of the collaborative model. In terms of the current incentive plan, we'll be getting into and looking at, okay, the quantitative elements are definitely going to be important, but the qualitative components are going to be just as important. We're going to talk about what are the weightings of each. How much weighting do you want to have on quantitative versus qualitative? You've asked for my views, rightfully so, on this before, and we definitely are more supporters of having a higher weighting on quantitative. At the end of the day, it's much easier to understand the message if you're a teacher out there or a government official to say, yes, the compensation that's been paid out, is healthy, is a lot of money, but it's justified based on a variety of reasons, and in part because the investment results are there to show for it. And as was mentioned earlier, a big chunk of this will be done in collaboration with the investment committee and the investment consultants around particularly around the quantitative measures. So this is just pure example to show you, but you probably remember, Dana recalls this, we did a lot of this back in 2011 and have implemented this practice for the last several years and will continue to apply it, is making sure that everything that we're doing a lot of detailed analysis, right? We don't want to just say, okay, here's what we recommend in terms of implementing. We want to back test it. We want to forward test it to make sure that there's no nasty surprises that could come into play, and to make sure that we're, at the end of the day, rewarding the type of behavior that we want to reward and penalize the type of behavior that we want to penalize. Again, we'll be tracking through this. We'll be looking at working in alongside the investment consultants in the committee is, what is the right amount of value add that we want to see within the measures. You definitely don't want to be paying, for minimal value add being generated. So we'll, and at the same time, we want to make sure that we're not incentivizing too much risk taking, where we get the wrong kind of behavior, and we want to be competitive in terms of, what is the market doing. So you've always heard me say before, you don't want to too many organizations place too much focus on just paying, what is competitive levels of compensation. We want to continue to spend a good chunk of time balancing that out to say, okay, here's the competitive level of compensation, but here's the competitive level of value add returns that we want to see as key stakeholders in this, in order for you to see that competitive level of compensation. This is just a very simple illustration of what a long-term incentive plan looks like. If you really kind of try to simplify it, again, I mentioned the annual bonus plan for the most part is looking at a 12-month performance period. We need to have a vehicle in place under the collaborative model that really gets staff thinking more longer term, but then also getting penalized for not hitting those numbers, or getting penalized if they decide to leave for whatever reason. So in this example here, you receive a long-term incentive grant at the beginning of, say, a 3-year period of an opportunity to potentially earn $1,000 if you actually hit specific performance measures. But if you decide to leave in year 2 and, say, go down the street, you lose everything that you've got unvested on the table. And that's a good design in terms of protecting CalSTRS.
Louise, we'll be talking throughout when we have the deeper dive, we're going to be talking about what we mean by long-term.
Correct.
Because in here, you're saying kind of like 3+.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about, is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 5 years? We would definitely recommend probably not going past 5 years, but definitely there's a lot of both market data and justification of being in that 3 to 5 year window of measurement. And we'll talk about kind of the vesting provisions around it, and then we'll be also talking about what is the right measures within that long-term incentive plan. We've for the benefit of some of the new directors, we've talked about how some organizations that have long-term incentives have been burned and made the mistake of only rewarding for relative performance. And you've heard me, somewhat joke, but in a serious way, you don't want to be that board that ends up paying for being the best of a worse bunch, right? It's not a good position to be in, right? So there's ways that we will make sure that does not happen.
Okay. Gail.
Thank you. Has there ever been a vesting and performance period requirement at CalSTRS?
So indirectly there is under the annual piece, but no, not because there has never been a long-term piece.
Thank you.
Okay. So if you remember, well, Dana would recall, one of the first things we did when we first started working for the committee was we did a lot of work around putting in a new kind of performance system for the CIO and the CEO in terms of scorecard. Something to make it more measurable, something to make it more easy to administer and process as a committee. And I think, that process has really helped. What you're going to need to be looking at now is just saying, okay, now under the collaborative model, what do we need to tweak, right? So, you're likely going to want to put in a measure or certain measures that are more aligned to the collaborative model. You may want to adjust some of the weightings. There's been some talk about, reviewing and saying, okay, does some of the qualitative measures need to change? So again, I don't see this as a complete change of everything. It's just doing a tune-up and looking at it and making sure that it continues to be aligned. It is aligned to the collaborative model. Kind of already touched on this earlier in that, but again, we along the same lines around the performance measures, you're now going to have, if you think about it, you're going to have a lot more active investing. So you just need to make sure that when it comes to the compensation relating to that active investing, that you have a way of better tracking it. And the current tools could work. They just need to be adjusted, and we'll be walking through all of those options with you. So this one's, I think, huge. So I touched on this earlier. Harry brought this up in May. We want to make sure that you have a way of tracking the success of the collaborative model. Now, the way I'm talking to you about it today is going to be from a compensation governance perspective. You're going to have, the investment committee is going to have a different definition of how they're tracking success. The board as a whole, more strategically, is going to have a different definition. My job is to make sure that I protect you, to make sure that you have a mechanism to say, okay, from a compensation perspective, it's meeting our needs or it's not. And if it's not, that there are mechanisms in place to penalize people, to make sure that behavior changes and a course set is made. And so I think on the next slide here, it's coming up actually. So again, we'll be looking at kind of the measures around that, the reporting back of that. A key part of it is going to be, we've talked so much about reducing total compensation spend as an organization, and where a big chunk of that is frankly going to be coming from the shift of the compensation that was being paid out to external fund managers towards more towards the internal side. We need to make sure that that's working. And so, I think it's on the next slide here. Here it is. So, looking at saying, okay, our total compensation spend is dropping, but how do we look at the gross returns and the net returns, right? So you still want, you still want the team to be focused on generating the best risk-adjusted returns as possible, but then also be thinking about how do I do that now in a more cost-effective way, and how do I measure that? So.
You want to jump in, Chris?
If you don't mind me crashing the party.
Go ahead.
Chris Ailman, Chief Investment Officer. I just thought this would be helpful because if you remember, we talked yesterday about the investment costs in that 10-year financial plan. So when you look at Luis's column of external managers, remember that gets paid two different ways. That's what's hard. And we talked about the fact that one is visible, which is really June and Glenn's area, where we're paying out a fee to a manager every quarter. The collaborative model is really trying to save, and we've already saved a lot of money there by bringing those assets internal. The next step is, unfortunately, a hidden column on your financial reports, which is money that is netted out of the limited partnerships. And it's really that where he's talking about the external managers. In your mind, if you can think, oh, the limited partnerships, we're hoping to save money on the limited partnerships. It's netted. And it is going to cost you more in compensation. So I really wanted, I should do a better job, I guess, visually of cementing home. You've kind of got 3 buckets of expenses: internal, external managers on a contract, and limited partnerships. And the limited partnerships are 5/6. Can't say that clearly. Somebody work that out quick. That's like 80% of the cost. And Gail challenged us. We've got to find a better way of through Deborah's cost report, showing you that in hard numbers. And I'm thankful. I know Paul Rosensteel would slap me for that, but I'm thankful now that we're doing that cost report. I was a bit hesitant at the beginning, but yeah, he's probably watching. It actually has been helpful now to show, we knew that cost was there, we knew it was big. We talk about it in a capture ratio. So again, think in June and Glenn's area, to visually think of them, we capture 95 to 96% of the return that they generate. Less than a few percent goes out to the managers. In Mike DeRay's real estate area, we capture about 86% of the profits. So 14 goes out to managers. In Margot's area, we still don't think we have a good number, but it's somewhere in the low 70s that we capture. So over 25% is going out to the managers. Those are the areas, and we don't have a good number on infrastructure yet, but we'll get one. It's probably somewhere in the 80s as well, like Mike's. Those are the numbers we're trying to do, where we capture more of the money, reduce our costs. But Luis is spot on, as we discussed. The challenge is you're going to have to hire your people, not Goldman Sachs people. And that's a cost that is a hard dollar cost that shows up to the system. So I just wanted to help you. The expression you're doing is spot on, looks very nice and clean. Our reality, the way we live, is it's really complex because it's different. Maybe the best way to think about it is it's different bank accounts.
Right.
Your family sees your checking account, you see your savings, but then there's this other hidden account over there that you don't really see that much.
That's for clothes.
Oh, I think we all have one of those.
That's
that
for
doesn't,
shoes, right?
you hide it from your ATM so you can't pull money out of it. But I mean, literally it's that kind of thing. You have 3 different bank accounts, it's all your money. It's all netted out of the return. As Bill Pazant said, it reduces your return. So if you can save, in his example, from year 1 to a current, where you're saving $60 million. Remember, I was talking about it's close to $1 billion out 10 years from now. That's real return to the teachers. Absolutely. Of net, more money in their pocket. Same return, but more money in our pocket. And I always say we pay benefits with net return, not gross.
That's right. Thanks, Chris. That's actually really helpful for me to think
Okay.
about those different buckets in
feel
terms
bad
of the
then.
costs.
No.
No, that's okay. We've got actually a couple questions, so you might want to hang out, Chris.
Oh, okay.
Joy?
That's fair.
Yeah, thank you. So part of my question was gonna be to kind of clarify that. So Chris, thank you for doing it. I guess my other question is, when we think about the, what you call the kind of the hidden column of what we will save because of because of what we'll
Not being in
save
partnerships.
by not being in the LPs, is that as neatly done to be sort of like measured on an annual basis, or is that also more complicated because it's sort of over the life of the LP that would have been?
It's complicated, but we're gonna try and do it on an annual basis. Remember the example, if I could take you back to yesterday, I think it was Margot and Bill got into a discussion about co-investments. And literally where he said, you start paying 2% management fee the day you commit, not put money, but commit to a private equity fund. Co-investment, you never put that in until you actually do the co-investment and you don't pay the 2%. So Deborah does it on a calendar basis because that's the best way. The partnerships run on calendar basis. So we're gonna always have that mismatch. But yes, that's why we've said to you, we have 3 years worth of data. Even that's not long enough. A partnership typically lasts about 14 years. I'm not gonna make you wait. We will try and extrapolate because we'll know when we do a co-investment, that would have been in a partnership. We know what partnerships cost on average. And so we'd be able to, Scott and I were just whispering over there, we need to flag those investments. And even the ones we've already done. We've told you, we've been doing some for a couple of years in real estate. flag those and say, okay, we're doing them this way, but they would have been in partnerships, and we already measure now what the partnership average cost is. So we'll always have an average to compare it to.
And
So it won't be a, exact an apple for apple, but it will be this investment versus business as usual.
And so there, as we're developing these models, some of the criteria that you'll use or the formulas that you'll use to try to estimate savings from not being in those partnerships will be based on our sort of, averages that we've got, and we'll have a chance to take a look at those as we're developing
Yep.
the model. Okay.
Yep. We're gonna incorporate Deborah's cost report more and more into the financial, not the budget for the legislature, but the financial planning report, so you see a comprehensive picture.
Deborah's looking, okay, I'm more work, okay, I got it.
And then just kind of more broadly, when looking at kind of establishing this kind of a metric, to evaluate the success of the model, we'll also have a chance to discuss to whom this type of metric would apply, because it doesn't seem like it's something that would apply to, all the investment staff. It would sort of apply to key staff in key areas? Or is it something that potentially, all the investment staff that are kind of on a performance-based criteria may have some element of their compensation that'll be based on the success of the model overall?
I would take the latter. It's gonna impact everybody in some way. I love analogies, not a sports analogy. I'll pick a hospital. Doctor gets all the credit in the operating room, but there was a team, even the admitting nurse, that made it all happen, somebody in accounting keeping track of everything. So the collaborative model is definitely more complex, much more hands-on tracking for us. So while there will be a point person on Margot or Mike's staff, there's an entire team behind them making it happen. And so that's why I think it's going to filter across Deborah's side, even the internal public markets, Glenn and June's side. But we will be able to capture the return impact as well as the cost impact on an estimation basis, but something that at least is fairly black and white to simple numbers.
It's reminding me that as we venture into the collaborative model, not only are we looking at it kind of affects so many parts of the building and some of the processes, so including the cost report that I think we've gotten so much attention for in the last 3 years. It seems like we're gonna have to do some modifying to be able to capture some of these numbers, because I think the stakeholders as well as the board, if we're gonna approach the collaborative model and really do this right, I mean, part of the big point of it is cost savings and being able to capture that in some easy way to be able to look at through your cost report would be great. Deborah, did you want to comment on that?
Thanks, Sharon. That's a great segue into what I want to comment on. Deborah Smith, Chief Operating Investment Officer. So as you see the cost report, and as you saw in January, we did look at the capture ratio. We provided you our first draft of it. We're going to be enhancing that. As Chris said, how much profits are we capturing? So that's one of the things. The other thing that you'll hear as we go over the business plans later today is that one of our key initiatives with the collaborative model is to identify what constitutes an internally managed limited partnership. Good. Is that 51% ownership from CalSTRS? What does that, how do we define it? And CalSTRS is going to define it because there is no cost standard. So we're setting the cost standard with our transparent cost report.
Great. That's great. Thanks, Deborah. We'll look forward to that. Did you want to add anything, Scott? You jumped up there, so join the party.
Exactly. It's become a big party here. My name is Scott Chan. I'm the Deputy Chief Investment Officer. And I was just going to provide a clarification of one of Chris's points in the sense that, we're talking about a hidden column, but what really matters is our net asset value. And that's what matters to you and all our beneficiaries. So it is, all the costs are captured in that number. And I think it's our job to, through the cost reports and what we're trying to do to identify some of those costs to bring it to bear. In other words, in our investment managers' returns, those costs get netted out, but we should make that visible, because the double bottom line obviously is net asset value, and that's what we really should be focused on and measuring.
I appreciate that, Scott, because that's probably a dangerous word, knowing that we broadcast on the internet and Bloomberg might be listening. think of your mutual funds that you have personally or in your retirement account. They net out the management cost. You don't get a bill at the end of the year from the mutual fund saying, pay me this much to run your assets. And that's what I mean by, I'll use that hidden word, the H word, is it's just netted. So you just don't see it explicitly. It's reported to us, we know it, but it's not a physical bill you have to pay, so that's why it's tracked differently. Thanks,
And
Scott.
just one last comment I was going to make is part of the reason I asked the question about how, kind of measuring the success of the model would apply across staff is because it seems like our opportunities to improve our capture ratio are greater with the private asset classes as compared to the public markets. And so
Right.
so while I appreciate, I think you're right, it is a whole team effort, but the financial opportunity is so much greater in some part of the organization.
No, that's true,
Yeah.
because we didn't use the word collaborative when and I'll take you all the back, I think it was about 2012, when John Petzold, Deputy CIO at the time, presented we called it a shift to internal. So the first thing we did was say, instead of hiring BlackRock or Vanguard or somebody like that, we're gonna use our internal staff. And so now, as you know, we run over half of the assets internal. We're kind of thinking that's our version of collaborative for the publics, but you're right, we've already captured that. And now most of the bang for the buck, frankly, is in the partnership side, which is, don't ever forget, it's in CIS, so it's in the old corporate governance unit, infrastructure, inflation sensitive. It's in RMS, and it's in private equity and real estate. So private equity and real estate are always the ones that get the big attention because they're so large, but it does touch a good chunk of the directors.